Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I'm your host, Darla LeDoux, and I'm here today with Janae Rice. Hi, Janae.
Hi, so great to be here.
Thank you so much for saying yes. I am always inspired by your posts on social media, so just know they're having an impact, and I
Amazing.
can't wait to hear what you're going to say today.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, for the formal introduction, Janae is a somatic psychotherapist, movement therapist, and intimacy educator with over 20 years' experience in trauma integration and holistic body healing. Her work focuses on unraveling emotional inheritance. Oh, I just saw you're hosting a retreat about that.
Yep.
That jumped out at me too. Um, and fostering authentic connections with embodied wisdom, like cutting edge stuff, you guys. As
Mm,
a licensed integrative therapist and psychedelic facilitator, she guides individuals toward deeper healing and full spectrum living. She's dedicated to nurturing resourced nervous systems and supporting the resurrection of one's whole enough self.
yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like I have to start by asking about the whole enough self.
Thank you. Yeah. This came to me even just like 6 months ago, right? It really just started to land because so many of us are on this perpetual healing cycle and just that journey, right? And myself included, right? Going to the
Yes.
next coach, doing the next thing, like
Mm.
trying to refine, which is beautiful. But sometimes that can really halt us from actually being in the sense body and fully stepping into our lives. So it's
Mm.
this where you're whole enough, where you have enough skills, enough tools
Yeah.
to love, experience the relationships you want to experience, parent the way you want to parent, right? Like lead in the ways that you want
Mm.
to lead, from this place where I have enough, right? It's enough.
I love that so much. I talk about the energy pattern that's hidden from our view, which I know you do your
Yes.
version of that, right? But it's like we can't see it, but it's here and it's really running us. And yet, if we're over here like just trying to find it, then we never will because it's like beautiful at hiding. So we have to go just live fully and
Yeah.
allow the world to respond and then trust ourselves to deal with what comes up.
Yeah, yeah, and have enough skill, right? So we don't further experience small t trauma, which then
Yes,
can do a whole slew of things and put us back into that survival mode, right? Which doesn't
exactly.
help us be in service to the great impact that we all want to have, right? And sometimes the greater impact is like in our own lives and how we want to show up day to day. Sometimes it's in our parenting, right? And just like doing
Mhm.
it a little bit differently, right?
I'm
Or
definitely going to ask you about parenting because your posts about
uh,
conversations with your daughter are so precious and so good.
thank you.
So I
Thank
will
you.
ask about that. But first, let's
Awesome.
talk about you. So what got you on this path? How did did you have a different career and then you stepped over or have you always been committed to intimacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in the last, 15 years I really focused on this and, really dedicated my studies to it. But honestly, it's been my whole life because everything is a relationship, right? We have relationships with our food, our families, the earth, maybe consciously or unconsciously with the cosmos, right? I mean, everything is a relationship. And I really struggled early on in life with relationships.
Mm.
And, I was just like, I knew it in my heart. I was just like, I want to understand and master this. Like, what
Mm.
does it really mean to be available for myself and receptive to life and to actually be in an authentic relationships with people, not the veneer of like, hi, how are you? It's just like,
Yes.
just beautiful in and of itself. And I understand the role that plays, but really being in deep
Yes.
relationship.
It's so needed. My partner and I went to a party. We traveled out of the country to go to this anniversary party, and it was a dear friend from like ages ago. And she had invited all her friends from different parts of her life, and we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
I knew some people or I knew of them through her. And this skill that you're talking about was so absent. It was like we were a bunch of people staring at each other, trying to figure out a way in. And so my partner and I were like, let's play a game and see how many times people ask us anything today. And it was like two in a whole
Yeah.
day.
Right. It's that, and I know there's lots of cultural things that can prevent someone from asking a question. We have our, personal ideas about that. And right now, I feel like more than ever, it's like the world needs people really showing up and reconnecting. I mean, especially
Yes.
everything that we've just been through in the last, 3 to 5 years. And it's like we have to remember how to
Mhm.
be in relationship, and our nervous systems are all out of whack right now,
Yeah.
right? And to step back into that, so that makes sense to me, right? Like why folks are like,
Yes. Like,
like
how do we remember how to do this?
right, totally. And I think so many of us, and myself included, like we can feel so afraid to be awkward, right? And often I just like to preface that. I'm like, this might come out a little awkward, but what I want to say is
That's
this,
so good. Yes.
right?
You struggled with relationships, but like you've always been really aware that everything's a relationship. So like you came out that way. Is it a soul knowing?
I
Tell
think
me more
so.
about that.
It's yeah, it's a soul knowing. And my dad, I mean, he's still alive, and growing up with him, he was so involved with like diversity projects and being involved in communities and really helping, those that struggled rise. And so I was just around like how do you communicate with all these different cultures, right? And I was really invited into studying the different religions and looking at, the many
Mm,
facets of life. So, and I think, astrologically and in my human design and all the, even in sourced,
uh,
wisdom, right? The magics, it's like it
yeah.
all plays out in who I have always been. And so it is a soul
Mm,
magic that was nurtured by, choosing parents that could support that.
that's
You
so
know,
great. I
it's so
love that
great.
for you.
Me too. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it sounds like a straight path, but it was definitely not a straight path by any means.
Well, so was there, often it's like people have their knowing and then they get disconnected from their truth.
Yeah.
And did you have that path?
Oh, definitely. Right. And, I could always feel the thread, right? Like the thread would like whisper in those different points and
Mm,
moments in life. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, I got real lost. I mean, I went down into the drug path and I mean,
mm,
really took a left turn and dropped out of high school. And, at the time, my guidance counselor was like, you might as well just drop out because this isn't going to support your path. I mean,
wow.
it was intense. And honestly,
Wow.
like I send blessings to this person now because it's like that was probably the best thing I could have done was
Mm,
actually just get out of that whole scene
mm.
and choose something else for myself, right?
Well, what happened next?
Yeah, yeah. So after that, there was a significant car accident where I had a near-death experience, and that was sort of the
Mm,
pinnacle of all of this, right? This big accumulation of just stepping away from myself, like not living at home, being involved in drug culture and gang culture, and I mean it was pretty intense between about 15 and
wow.
18, and then yes, outer body experience that shifted everything for me.
Mm,
And I had a conversation with what I like to call collective consciousness, or as your
mm,
language, like source wisdom. And I was just shown, I was shown like, okay, like you can come home, or you can go back to Earth.
mm,
And here are some of the teachers you'll meet, and here are some of the people you'll support. And I totally was like, I want to go back. Like I want to go back to this
wow.
human experience. I'm just getting teary as I'm talking about this because it's so profound,
Mm,
but it's like I want to go back and do this human thing, right? And learn and understand these soul lessons that are necessary to
mm.
to be a loving person and contribute to the betterment of this world, right? And then it was a little bit of an uphill battle, right? Like healing and coming back
Yeah,
to.
so you're 18, you
Yeah.
have this experience. Do you tell people about it or?
Oh, it was all over the news. So it
Okay.
was told whether I wanted it to or not.
Oh, oh, well,
Oh, yeah.
that's a whole other
It's a
experience.
whole other experience, but necessary, right?
Was
It's
it
like,
being spoken about as a near-death experience? How we hear
oh,
about it today?
oh, yeah. I mean, it was on the news that I was, severely injured. I was resuscitated and all those things. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, and yeah, but it was, honestly, I have no regrets. It was like probably one of the most powerful things that like shifted the entire course of my life because when I chose to live, right, when I decided to
Yes.
claim my life, changed everything, right? And it was like, I mean, I stopped doing drugs. You know what I mean? It's like it's everything shifted. I moved back in with my dad, and I there was a school in Washington State that was for natural medicine. And since I was 14, I heard about it, and I was like, I want to go there someday. But it was this distant dream, right? It was so far away. But after that experience, I was like, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get my GED. I'm gonna go to community college. I'm gonna like figure out my path to get there. And then when I was accepted at 27, I was like, okay, here we go. Like all of that hard work,
Wow.
like through my 20s and all of that, just allowed me to be available to go to school and devote myself to
Mm.
really everything I do now.
I'm seeing the degrees framed behind you, and it's like giving a whole new context of what it took to get there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How does someone receive that at 18? I mean, I guess you're in soul state, but like, oh, these are the people I'm going to serve. What was that? How did you interpret that?
Totally. Definitely very skeptical until I met the first teacher. And
Mm.
because I know all of their faces. And
Mm.
so when I met the
Wow.
first teacher, I was like, oh, okay. Like this is a real thing. And then, I've met a few other of them, of the faces that were shown. And it's just like, okay, this path for me is completely guided. And that's my belief system.
Mhm.
So I think at the time I just held it as like, I mean, I believe in magical things, right? And I think I grew up in a fairly magical home. So it's like, okay, like this is possible, but
Mm.
I don't know, right? I mean, you read about things and you're like, oh, did that really happen? Until you experience it, it's
Yeah,
just an idea.
that's amazing. I'm imagining you growing up, where these conversations about connection and communication are common, and then almost like your soul saying, yeah, but I need to go do something else just to make sure.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it was so dynamic growing up, right? I mean, there's just so many things and growing up just outside of Boston, there's just like a lot of layers there.
Mm.
And, I grew up in predominantly white community. And so being a person of mixed race, I mean, that just had this idea of belonging, right? I mean, there were just so many aspects of like, how do we do this humaning thing, right? Like, how do we belong,
Isn't
and
that
how
the
do we,
question?
it really is. And how do we bring people in and respect like each of our unique experiences in a way where we can feel like we can be in relationship with each other,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
So it's just, I mean, I'm 100% devoted to
Mm.
this exploration, this living question of how do we do this?
It shows.
Thank you. Thank you.
So talk about Compass Rose.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I felt something big brewing, and that's when, I sought out Ashley and sourced because it's like something was coming, and so it was a dream for a really long time that, all of the things that I've studied would come together. Like there was a system there, right? An alive system. And so kept having this reoccurring dream for almost a year and a half of this woman who would, the house we were living in at the time, would come to the sliding glass door and she would knock on it, and I would try to open it and I couldn't open it. And then finally in February of, almost 2 years ago, she knocked on the door and the door just slid open, Darla.
Mm.
And she hands me this big brown book, and on top of it, it says, this is for you. I hope you can figure it out. Love, God. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I jumped out of bed, and then I was just writing and writing and writing and writing, and the entire system for the Compass Rose landed. And just this accumulation of everything I've ever learned, just like from looking at the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic body, and how do we honor these different systems that have these crucial initiations that so many of us miss in those early developmental years,
Mm-hmm.
right? That just generationally, these ways of being impact us so much when we miss like these necessary stages,
Yes.
right? To activate the soul or activate the heart in ways where we can, again, be whole enough. And so that's how this all came about. And I mean, I'm still living in this system. It's very alive. What I've found is that
Yes.
it attunes to the individual. If I'm facilitating retreats or groups, it attunes to the group field. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very holistic system. It's not even me, right? It's like I often refer to
Mm-hmm.
her as she, just because it's like this other energy is holding
Yes.
what's moving through me, right?
Okay, so that communicates to me directly, personally, and people are probably like, what does she mean? So let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, I love that you got the download and it came through as a system. And I've heard lots of people talk about that. I
Mm.
think for me, my stuff has come more like someone asks a question and then I answer it. And then I'm like, oh, I should write that down. So I haven't gotten the like, oh my God, here's the full system. But I have a lot of clients who have. And it takes something to trust it. So did you ever have a moment of like, okay, maybe I just was insane that night and this is nothing?
Oh yeah, every
Like, how
day.
did you empower it?
Yeah, I mean, every day there's like, I mean, the doubt, right? That human side of me that was just conditioned to not believe my, like the innate truth, right? That's coming through. And so constantly working with that part of myself, right? And
Yes.
and it was just testing it, right? Because what was happening is I was already using this with clients. It was just compartmentalized. So when it
Yes.
bloomed as a full system, it's like, oh my goodness, this whole thing actually makes so much sense.
Mhm. Yeah, you said, we miss these stages. And so it sounds like you're like taking parts of maybe work you've done with your clients and alchemizing it, like helping it come into a system that they need. How do you see that? How do you hold that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, kind of high level, because there's so many sort of spiral rings in this system, but high level, there's 8 main directions on the medicine wheel, the compass rose medicine wheel. And they're divine layers of transformation. And so, each direction, so for example, the Northeast is all about rebirth, right? As a whole, like
Mhm.
that's the holding energy of that. And then there's 8 initiations in that direction,
Mm.
right? Like one of the initiations is around the divine play between victim consciousness and mother consciousness, right? When we can understand that relationship in ourselves, like where we are not taking full responsibility for what we're doing in the world or how we're moving, then we aren't able to show up and lead the way we want to, right? And understanding like where am I not mothering myself and just waiting for someone else to do the thing that
Mhm.
I am actually here and meant to do, right? Like I love
Yes.
your words, like my unique magic, and how do we bring that to the world?
Love that. So
Yeah.
when you think about the system attuning to the group, I feel like even what you just said helps me get it more. And I know, I teach about holding groups and how to navigate and the energy field of the group, and each group is distinct. And then when you think about the system, is it like you intuitively know which of the eight the group most needs, or talk more about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, that's part of it, right? So, because the system's always looking at the compass rose is always looking at the individual, right? The group and the collective field. It's just like, it's almost like a constant scanning of like,
Mhm.
where are we at? So, you can hear in people's language, you can see in how they move their bodies, right? Where it's like, okay, you're primarily riding here, right? We can see
Mhm.
so much, for example, right? So the direction of the self has to do with our teenage self and really activating the part of us that can take, what do I want to say here, like conscious risk, right? You can see it's so many adults, they're so afraid to leap into the thing that they most desire. And part of that is the misinitiation in our teenage years that's suppressed, right? Where parents are often so afraid to like let the teen sort of step into their identity, say, right? And fully question life and even question parenting methodology and all of that, right? When that's like hunkered down on, we don't know that, oh, wow, it's okay to actually go out and do this. And so then you see that in adulthood. So when I'm in a group space, I'm constantly scanning, okay, like, okay, someone's kind of around here, they're hovering here, they dip into there. And then you looked at the field of consciousness, right, around it. And so it's like, okay, we're about like, maybe it's self-marriage, which is this, you know, the Southwest. It's like people really needing to connect deeply with themselves, right? And know that like, I am the gatekeeper of my relationships ultimately. And that's the self-marriage. So yeah, it's it's so alive, and really my role is to be a hollow bone and listen, because it's so alive in its consciousness. And the beauty of it is I never wanted to be like the guru, like I hold the medicine, only I can interpret the wheel. It's like what I do with clients is teach them the wheel, and then it moves through them in a unique way. And they get to play with it in a whole other way. So it's really like creating a shared consciousness around how do we, step in this embodied aliveness with each other.
I love it. I have a new mastermind program that I've been launching behind the scenes, and the promise is to trust yourself and follow what's alive as you grow your business. And so
That's cool.
I love that you keep using that word. I'm like,
It's awesome.
that's amazing. Okay, so I think people can really feel and get a sense of that because everyone listening is magical or learning to be. And I love, do you see this as a certification? Is that?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
It's like
Yeah, I
right
could
now,
so see that.
yeah.
We're in such need of new conversations, new frameworks for conversations, because we just, like my story of going to that event, and it's like everybody's defaulting to the absolute lowest common denominator conversation because there's no context was created for anything else.
Right, exactly. Right. And, I often say to clients before they sign on, I'm like, are you ready for your inner snow globe to get completely shaken up? Because, I mean, this wheel will compost all the things that don't align, right? And resurrect the parts of us that we forget or that have been pushed aside or clouded over. And it changes your whole life. It's, since this body of work has landed, it is shape-shifted my entire life.
What's the main thing that's changed? I'm sure there's not one, but like what pops to mind?
Gosh, I think partnering in business, right? It has my partner and I, we coach couples together, and it just has us framing how we work with couples in a whole different way, right? So it's like, how are we holding them? Like, where are they developmentally stuck in a way that they keep having the same dysfunctional conversation? And what's going to help to like unkink that so they can move into a restorative place of health? And, like I shared earlier, like these really resourced nervous systems, right? And business wise, it's like, I'm sure Ashley said this at some point, but it's like I couldn't like niche down, right? I was so afraid to like hone it in. And this is like, it wants clarity, right? And every day, it's like, it's either you're on the path of the compass rose, Jannae, or you're not. And she really demands my fullness and my respect and my deep listening. And so it's a grand love affair, really, with like just with my work and with the clients that I have the honor of working with.
Isn't that the best way to do work?
Yes, it's a very privileged place, and I want it for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell everyone about Fina and how she's been your teacher.
Oh my goodness, this little girl. So yeah, Afina, she's 8 years old, and she's been a teacher since the womb, really. We had such a profound connection for those 9 months. And then when she came out, it was just like, how are we partnering in this life? And
Mm.
it's so interesting because I developed this
She
body.
said that. You said
Oh,
that.
I
It
said
was a
this, like,
mutual knowing.
yes, a mutual
Okay.
knowing, and like definitely something I still say this to her, like, how are we partnering with this, right?
Hmm.
She's the grand experiment, right? I have this body of work called the embodied parenting, and she's the grand experiment around embodied parenting. And what does it actually mean to trust her sovereignty and trust her boundaries, and for her to have influence and power in her own 8-year-old life. And it's been such a profound experience, right? Often I feel I don't know if it's like embarrassed, but I feel self-conscious because not that we don't have some challenging moments, but our relationship has so much ease in it, right? And she's constantly teaching me just about her own boundaries and what works. An example might be, I mean, she's just so adorable. So I just like want to go in and like snuggle her and like scoop her up still and like kiss her, even though her legs are like dangling down to my calves at this point, right? But it's like, and she'll be like, Mama, you didn't ask. And it's
Mm.
like, you're right, I didn't ask. And so I'll put her down and then I'll like turn around
Mm.
and I'll face her again. I say, Fina, can I give you some kisses? And then she'll be like, yes, you can. And so she understands the ritual
Yeah.
around consent and
Mhm.
boundaries. And I couldn't be happier.
Amazing. I've had clients struggling with parenting, and I'm like, go follow Janae because it
Thanks.
will just make it make sense how to have these conscious conversations. And like, at what age did she or you, I don't know, I mean, it's co-created. She's 8. Like, how old was she when she started being able to express her
Yeah.
needs, her sovereignty?
Yeah. I mean, just probably like, I mean, she knew sign language like early on. So she would say her like nose and things like that. But
Mm.
definitely as she became more verbose, like around 2, I mean, she was just very clear about
Wow.
what worked and what didn't work. And so we're still, we negotiate things. It's like, and really respecting just like these tiny things where, and we do it so subconsciously. So I have so much compassion for myself and other parents where it's like, okay, you got to get up right now and like go do this thing,
Mm.
right? Beautiful. But if someone were to do that to me, I mean, I'm neurodivergent, so it's like that's just even harder
Mm.
for me to like transition into the next thing.
Mhm.
But to allow kids for us to buffer some of that time to allow them to say, oh, can I have 3 more minutes?
Yeah.
Right? It just supports them. So she and I are just,
Mhm.
in a really dynamic conversation, like, and very early on, from like 2.5, it's like, okay, we're going to go do this thing. And it's like, oh, you want to play first? Okay, can we set a timer for like 10 minutes and play? And then we're going to put our shoes on. And does that take a lot of effort? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
But I'm like so grateful I did that heavy lifting early on because now I see it in how she communicates to me, right? Like my inner
Mhm.
voice became my outer voice, which became her inner voice, and now is her outer voice,
Mm.
right? And the way she
So
communicates
beautiful.
with me. It's like, I got some test prints for this oracle deck for the Compass Rose that I'm making.
Mhm.
I was sitting down and I was looking at them, and she, kind of strolls up. What you doing, Mama? And I was like, oh, I'm looking at, my cards that just got printed. Can I show you something really cool, Fina? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, aren't these amazing? She's like, Mom, they're amazing. I love them. And even if you didn't make them, you'd still be amazing. It's like those are the kind of things that she says.
Wow.
And I just know this because I say this to her all the time, right? It's like,
That's fabulous. I love it.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think about, um, I remember I have a lot of experiences of my mom being late. Like, she's still late. She'll always be late. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
her thing. But then grabbing me by the arm, why aren't your shoes on? Right. And like pulling me out the door. And I have, processed the trauma of that and the lack of sovereignty and the like, there was zero way to prepare for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a small thing, but to give her sovereignty like that is so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And it's just because, I want to own my beliefs here. It's like the past, our ancestral past, our karmic past, right? Even the past in this life, the present and the future, for me, it's all connected. And so, we have experiences like that, and it affects us down the line, right?
Mhm.
Like if there's, and I don't know if you experience this, but if there's pressure around needing to be somewhere, you might have a freeze
Mhm.
response,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you've worked through your trauma, but if you hadn't, right, there might have been an echo with
Mhm.
that
For
of like, come
sure.
on, Darla, we got to go. We got to get this project done. And you might feel the clench somewhere in your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the no. I'm an adult. I
Right.
don't have to.
And that part too,
Which is
right?
not super helpful, especially if you really want to go.
It's awesome.
So, you talked about FINA's boundaries, and I'm curious. I know you have a badass boundary class
Yeah.
for people. So, as you think about the evolution of your work, what role has boundaries played?
Yeah. I mean, it's core, right? I feel like the core two, at the center of the rose, if you will, like the core two practices are secure self attachment, which is a whole system I've developed, and my quiz should be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
Nice.
It's so yummy to really look at like how are we actually attaching to ourselves, and
Mhm.
then boundaries. Those two things for me in this system affect our business, our partnering, our parenting. I mean, just like dot, 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 it just ripples out from there, right? If we, one, are not innately connected to the divine wisdom of our body, right? And to the co-creative consciousness of like, I mean, with life in general, right? And having the clarity of how we're meant to use that, right? If we don't have some sense of feeling safe or at home, and then the boundaries to hold that,
Mhm.
boom, we just collapse.
Yeah, I
And we
would say we can't hear our own guidance at that point.
definitely, oh yeah, oh, I mean, we hear everyone else's guidance, right? And all the noise with that,
Exactly.
right? Where we've,
Exactly.
repeatedly like shut down hearing our own voice. And honestly, like one of the primary ways that majority of us experience that, maybe less so now as conscious parenting has really come on board, is around meal times, right? So many of us growing up were told to finish our plate. I mean, just raise your hand if you're like part of the Finish Your Plate
Mhm.
Club,
Yes.
right? What that does is it doesn't allow us to listen to our hunger cues and our satiety cues,
Mhm.
right? And we learn it's not okay to listen to our gut instincts around this,
Yes.
right? And ultimately that transfers to our yeses, our nos, our maybes. I need more information and time,
Mhm.
right? And so we have these experiences, and then that just branches out to the rest of our life, right? Because that's such a core place of don't listen to your body, right? And so it's that
Mhm.
cultivation of learning how to listen to that again, right? And then hold the boundaries around that, even in the internal boundaries, right? Where we've overstepped or we've abandoned our own, or haven't
Mhm.
respected our own inner boundaries around things,
Well, it
right?
feels too like the example of can I give you kisses,
Yeah.
right? Is also a piece of not being able to trust our body's reaction to, and whoever who wants to squeeze your cheeks or whatever.
100%,
Mhm.
right? And boundaries are a way that we come to learn where spaces and people really welcome who we are authentically, right? It says like, wow, I can just be myself. I can
Mhm.
actually share what works for me, what doesn't work for me, right? For my like
Yes.
the innateness of my soul, right? Or my
Mhm.
or my emotional needs, or my thought needs, really can show us, right, when we have that. And it takes so much bravery in this world to clarify our boundaries, right? Like speak our boundaries, and then we often have to repeatedly maintain them, right? Because other
Mhm.
people are not able, they don't know how to respect boundaries,
Yeah.
right? But once we start to learn that, right, this sort of like we really carve out the space internally to hold that and the confidence to do that, your whole world changes because intimately, right? If you have the boundaries around even like desires and wants, right? It's like, wow, this works, this doesn't work. And it's not a yes or no. This is my non-negotiable with this,
Right.
right? When I'm working with women who are really trying to transform how they like who they choose to be in relationship with, right? It's like this is huge to
Yes.
transform all of that, right?
What do you think, Janae, changes in the world when everybody has clear boundaries?
Oh, wow. I mean, I want to say everything, but that's so sweeping, right? Like, what changes is, I mean, at the very core, right? Our boundaries are, they feel vulnerable. And I think that's why people hesitate in sharing what really works for them and what
Yes.
really doesn't. And, but in that, it's like intimacy, into me see,
Mm.
right? It's like I'm letting you into me, right? And seeing what's inside of me and what works and what doesn't work. So what changes is how we relate to each other. Because then I can say, oh, wow, like, Darla, this doesn't work for you. Let me assess to see if I'm willing to shift how I do things to meet you because I want to maintain this relationship and this dynamic. Or
Mhm.
wow, that has me stepping outside of my like soul or innate needs. And so I'm actually not available for that. So we can actually, our communication shifts, right? We
Yes.
don't go as quickly to reactivity and our survival mechanisms, right? We can actually
Mhm.
stay in relationship in our differences and maybe find compromise, right? I mean, I just see how this trickles out from the home to communities to the collective, all right? When we really know ourselves, we can share from that place and then have the tools, which is one of the wheels on the compass rose path of how do you actually embody your heart and how are you a steward for what lives in your heart,
Mhm.
right? It just, I mean, I see it in my clients and it's so profound what shifts for a person.
It was, I think, 2 years ago, and I can't even remember what was going on or what the transformation was, but my theme was being loyal to my heart. And I can't believe how many places I saw where I didn't even know what my heart wanted, let alone advocate for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've been doing this a long time, right? So it was
Yes.
like,
Right. But when the,
imagine where I started.
totally, but when the question changes, the inquiry changes. Right. And there was
Mhm.
probably something about that the way the question was worded that it had you go to other layers of
Mhm.
depth within yourself, which is so
So true.
amazing, right? When we can get that curious and we can
Mhm.
ask better questions just in life and stay like, what's possible here? So much can
Mhm.
transform.
So you said boundaries feel vulnerable. It feels so true. And I'm curious on your journey, like where have you had to set a boundary that felt vulnerable?
Wow. I mean, gosh, there's so many, right? It's just picking one. I mean, I think even professionally, right? When, working in collaboration and it can feel vulnerable to, for me to advocate for what feels really meaningful for me. And the risk of like, oh, that's not going to work, or the risk of
Mhm.
being rejected or turned down or told the idea was dumb,
Mhm.
right? And then just like into, I mean, it's such an internal process, right? Like mindset will a shift in mindset around our boundaries will only take us so far is what I've learned. And that's like, the class that I shared for the listeners, when we can get into the body and actually hold the frequency of our boundary, it changes everything. And
Yes.
so, right. And so learning that of like, okay, wow, it feels really vulnerable to share what's important to me. And this is a boundary because this is holding this work, right, to feel confident in doing that. And it's for me, it's walking with the fear because again it's
Mhm.
whole enough, right? So I just often I use a lot of imagery and it's like taking the hand of fear and being like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to say this thing that to somebody else might feel so benign, but to me it's so
Right.
activating to speak what feels most important to me in regards to this collaboration, right?
Mm.
And it's like, and then taking the risk, right? The teenage self of like, I'm going to do this because this is important,
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And is the fear that, I mean, I know you said that it might not be received, but possibly under that is like this could fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah. The loss of the relationship.
Like if we're really not aligned,
Yeah.
then we'll know that, and
Yeah.
then we have to do something with that.
Definitely. And I've experienced that, where it's like the relationship starts out really juicy and aligned and we, but we're staying curious. We're, on the ship together, for a while, the
Mm,
relationship. And and then we come to figure out, oh wow, we have new insight, right? Of like, oh, this part actually isn't
yeah.
working for me. And sometimes it takes time to step into that understanding. And then it's vulnerable to say, wow, I thought it was this, and it was that for a moment. But since I've learned more about myself, my boundaries have
Mhm.
changed. My desires have changed. My wants have changed. And now we need to reassess, are we still aligned?
Yes.
That's so vulnerable. Again, because so many of us do not have the tools and the practices to grieve well enough, right? To grieve the loss of relationships,
Hmm.
so that way we can say, yes, that was that, and we can honor it and we can move forward without having to push someone away, right? I mean, this whole idea of like, shutting people down and cancel culture and all these things because someone
Yes.
said one thing that wasn't aligned. I mean, that is just isolating all of us even more. And
Right.
so, how can we hold more complexity? And for survival, what we do is we make things very black and white. We compartmentalize
Hmm.
things because it helps us to feel safe. But we are on this path as human beings to keep evolving, right? And this evolution of consciousness to actually be able to hold more, right? Like I can hold more. I'm like, wow, we're aligned here, here, and here, but we're not aligned there. And I can also feel the grief without, taking you down or saying something mean or rude because I feel hurt. I mean, this is like,
Yes.
and we just see this. I see this everywhere,
Totally.
everywhere. My daughter's school, like with the parents. I mean, it's like I see it in the couples Scott and I work with the individuals I work with. I mean, it's just on the streets. I mean, it's everyday life. Like, how do we stay in relationship
Yes.
without completely shutting down and shutting out?
Yes. And being able to acknowledge, okay, that's you, this is me,
Yeah,
and we have some different beliefs, and that's great.
and that's great. Right.
Yeah.
And blessings on your journey. And ouch, this kind of stings. And I
Yes.
wanted this to feel and look different. Right.
Hmm.
And it's not that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people needed to hear that.
Mm, yeah. We're not alone in this. I mean, we're all just trying to figure this out.
Mhm.
Right.
And then to get the tools to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even with boundaries, like I shared earlier, right, where it's like, yes, there are actual, like, tangible skills that are so supportive, right? Listening skills, right? Attunement skills, all of those things. If we are unable to regulate the main system of the body, the nervous system, right, in a way, which doesn't mean that like we're always calm because I don't believe in that, but it's like where we can feel the activation, work with it, breathe with it, be with it in the moment, right? So we can
Mhm.
stay in dialogue, or if we can't stay in dialogue, at least be able to say, you know what, I'm flooded. I need to take a
Mhm.
break. Can we come back in 20 minutes or a half hour, an hour,
Mhm.
tomorrow, right? Set a day and a time to reconnect.
Yes.
And so it really is for me, it's like the bottom up, right? As it is, just as much as it is top down, so we can meet in the middle in the heart, right? And what I mean by bottom up, it's like, a lot of the vagal theory stuff, the nervous
Mhm.
system work, right? Like how do we actually attune to the fundamental parts of our physical body, and then the consciousness, right? So we do this thing where this marriage happens in the middle, at the sort of middle chakra, right, in the heart,
Mhm.
where how do we take these sort of primal parts of ourselves, right? The animal body from the lower part, the lower chakras, and the consciousness of the higher chakras, and really bring it through the heart.
All while being in conversation
All while being,
about breaking up, maybe even.
yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is dynamic, and we are
Yeah.
designed for this. It's just so
Mhm.
many of us were
Say more
not,
about that.
yeah, like our bodies are designed for complexity.
Mm.
I mean, just think about all the systems that are co-regulating, co-living together all at the same time. And most of us, majority of the time, are functioning pretty well. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like the actual, I mean, just think about a cell and what a blood cell essentially does, and what it's transporting and all of these things. So we are actually designed to be with complexity. I think what happens again is we're not, especially here in the West, we're so out of ceremonial and ritual culture that initiates these in our systems, right? And it's unfair to the nuclear family. Like, here in the West, we're so hyper independent, and even the family
Mhm.
unit is so hyper independent. And so we're not in this mix of, wow, how do we actually be with all these different nervous systems? And I learn to regulate
Mhm.
in that.
I'm going to take this away from this conversation. Our bodies are designed for complexity. I feel like also in the entrepreneurial culture, right? I talk about, right? Like, let's simplify, let's make it lighter, which is true. Like, it feels lighter when your nervous system is regulated and you're not in fight or flight. So, I'm not saying that's not great and accurate. And I'm taking that as a little click of our bodies are designed for complexity, and we're so obsessed with simplifying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that, but
No, I
I
love
love
it.
it.
And because and okay, so we're just gonna like widen the web, I like to say, right? It's both,
Yeah.
right? Like we need simplicity because that gives the
Mm.
system a break, right? And the complexity
Mhm.
allows us to relate. And so I think it's
Mm.
like really having the discernment of when we use what system. And again, that comes back to the body wisdom of what does this moment need? Does it need simplicity? Or does it need me to widen within myself to be able to hold more complexity here? And
Mhm.
I just see that in the relational sense, right? If I can hold like all the difference that's here and the connection that's here and the grief from
Mm.
the call that I had earlier today, and oh wow, you're going through this thing tomorrow, and like, can I not tighten against
Yeah.
that? And it's
Mhm.
skills. It's skills, it's energetic work, right? To
Mhm.
actually be wide enough to let some of it run through and know to when, oh, I need to grab onto that piece and be with that and process that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so tell people about this Badass Boundaries class.
Yeah, definitely. So I love short classes. So it's under an hour, which is fantastic. And it's not your
Mhm.
typical boundaries class, right? You could probably chat
I'm
GBT.
sure people can tell that from this conversation.
You can find the skills anywhere on the internet, right? I really love the Boundary Boss. Like she's amazing. I'm losing the writer's name right now, but her work is amazing. If you're like, I need to
Mhm.
learn these fundamental skills, and but this work is how do we actually increase our capacity to be with our own boundaries, claim them,
Mhm.
own them, and then embody them, right? And the actual frequency. So it's somatic work in the sense that we're working with breath, we're working with movement, so you can actually feel the boundary in your body. And then you take that and you put the skills on top, boom. Because then you know when,
Mhm.
because I
So
like to
good.
say that others, their role in our life often is to challenge our boundaries, right? To really see, do you mean that? Do you own that? Is that yours? I don't love it. I wish it was very different. And that's part of my work to really change that, where someone can be like, oh, that's your boundary. I'm going to respect it. But that is not the world right now. So we are the ones, right? We are the ones who hold our own boundaries. And so when
Yes.
we can do that, it's like, and you have that inside and you know the truth of what you need or want or need to speak to or
Mhm.
maintain, we don't waver as much when someone questions us or
Mhm.
challenges us because we can feel it in the felt sense of our body. So that is the class. Please
Amazing.
enjoy.
Uh-huh. I'll put the link in the show notes. So, Janae, if you imagine someone who is out in the world and they're magical, maybe they have maybe they woke up with a dream and someone handed them something. and they're like not sure what to do with it, and maybe they're not surrounded by people who speak energy or get magic, what would you say to them?
I mean, two things. One, definitely dance that out. like, like move your body in some way that brings in pleasure, right?
Mm,
I mean,
mm,
pleasure is such the portal and the gateway for like being with like magic for me. And then the second
mm,
piece is really cultivating the fire within. There's some African cultures where they have these songs where they sing them really loud so it reverberates out, and then they start to sing it quieter and quieter and quieter until it's like they can only hear it. And
mm,
sometimes we have to carry that fire in our heart, and it's a quiet fire until we start to call in the people, that first person, our tribe, the coach, right? Darla, to really support them in bringing that magic more outward and louder. So I would say those two things, the fire and the dance. Dance around the
love it.
fire.
Love it. Thank you so much. This has been so fun. I'm going to reread my notes later. So I
Amazing.
just really appreciate you answering your call and bringing your work into the world. I can't wait to get my hands on your Oracle deck.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
So
Thank you so
I'll
much
keep
for,
watching.
yeah, thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure, and you're such, you're such an inspiration in everything that you do and be in the world. So thank you, Darla.
Mm, thank you.
Welcome.
Take care.